The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us all how much the American healthcare system has failed us.
You'll be able to keep your healthcare plan, period.
We are facing a gap between those who have and those who have not that is growing at a frightening pace.
My heart breaks for the millions of Americans who have been left behind.
The government has made sure the days where someone could affordably access health care are long gone.
At the FDA, only those companies with enough money and resources get approval, and once those companies do, they weaponize patents to keep out competitors.
All they do is squat on the patents of the old drugs that they have and jack up the prices of drugs that have been around longer than most of us have been alive, to the point where it's unaffordable. They jack it up 100 or 1,000 times because they know that the insurance and Medicaid and Medicare have to pay for it.
When we get the government out of healthcare and allow the costs to go down and the access to true affordable care to go up, it will be because of you.
We haven't had anything even close to a free and competition-based system in nearly a century.
If you get government out of healthcare, costs will go back down to the equilibrium. And we won't end up in a situation where the same government that decides whether we're essential or not decides whether or not we get healthcare.
Medicare is under threat like never before. You know that.
The current American healthcare system isn't working for anyone, other than the wealthy and the well-connected who always have access, or the billion-dollar insurance companies that bring in new record profits every year. It's time for real change. I'm Jo Jorgensen, and I approve this message.
Radio Network in cooperation with the Jorgensen-Cohen vice presidential campaign. My name is Pat Ford. I serve as chair of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. And it is my great pleasure to introduce to you, joining us for the first time on these airwaves, Steve Dosbach. He is the national campaign chairman for the Jorgensen-Cohen campaign. Steve, welcome. Welcome to campaign.
Glad to be here. Happy to be here.
I think we have a little bit of a.
I think you take a look at this every week. So glad to have an opportunity to talk with you all. Got some exciting things happening on the campaign trail. In fact, we're getting ready here in Greenville. The campaign bus is going to be rolling back in here on Sunday with Joe coming back home.
I just missed because of technical problems that what you said there. So kind of if you can give me a brief rehash. I apologize.
Oh, I was just mentioning that Joe is getting ready to finish out her the bus tour here in Greenville. So we're looking forward to having the homecoming here on Sunday.
Right, and we're looking forward to having Joe will actually be joining us on these airwaves next Friday night in campaign update. So I want to give folks, the purpose of this show, by the way, is to give folks a real connection to the campaign. And what I've been impressed with is how not only is the work ethic of the campaign, not only how talented so many of the folks involved in the campaign are, but the open lines of communication and the connection, if you will, to the libertarian grassroots. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that, what I'm about to say, but that is a marked difference from 2016. As a state affiliate chair, it's something I welcome and I embrace, and I'm thrilled to be part of the campaign myself. Full disclosure, I'm the Rhode Island campaign chairman, if you will, and I'm also now in charge of media for New England, working with under Richard Manzo. So it's exciting, it's thrilling, it's compelling. We've got great candidates. Give us a little bit of your background. You're the quiet guy in a sense, operating behind the scenes, but you've got a lifetime of experience with the movement. How did you get involved as a libertarian? What was your libertarian movement? And then just tell us some of the roles that you've occupied here.
Well, I discovered I was a libertarian in college, and first got involved in the movement when just after I got married, and I had 1 year left in college. My wife and I moved into married housing. And one of the neighbors there said, "Oh, he found out that I was my background in politics is I worked on the McGovern campaign as a knocking on doors, a local volunteer." And he said, "Oh, there's this person I have to introduce you to." So he takes me down 3 doors, introduces me to Joe Hauptman, who had been active with the college Republicans, ROTC Rangers, this kind of thing. Well, we discovered we're both libertarians. We just came at it from different directions. And, may have been a month or two later, I was managing his local campaign for city council as a Republican, but he was running on things like abolishing the Metro Squad and, the drug squad and the like. He lost, but did much better than Richard Nixon did in that district. So,
by the way, if I could jump in for a second, I actually, since we're comparing shared experiences, as I've mentioned on these airwaves before, I actually volunteered for the commission for the re-election of the president. So I was also a proud member of CREEP.
Well, that's my defense of working for George McGovern is, well, he was running against Richard Nixon. Right. But anyway, he and I formed a local, and then another person formed a local libertarian group on campus affiliated with SIL. And then that was kind of we often graduated, stayed in touch. About 5 years later, he had moved down to Indiana where I was teaching. And we both decided we were kind of impressed with how the party had done in 78. We were impressed with Ed Clark and said, yeah, we'll get involved. So we joined the Libertarian Party, and Joe made the phone call to national headquarters and said, well, hey, we're new Libertarian Party members here in Indiana. Who's running the Clark campaign here? We'd like to get involved. And they said, funny you should ask. And the next thing we knew, we were running the Clark campaign in Indiana. So, and I'm sure anybody who's a libertarian activist has had experiences like that before. Right. So I was state chair a couple times in Indiana. I ran for office a number of times, including a race for Secretary of State that got us ballot status the first time. But before they jacked up the requirement 4 times, and so we lost it for a while. And then 85, I joined the Libertarian National Committee and was elected chair I served as chair from 93 to 98. And then the incoming chair asked me to come on as the national director. And that's what brought me to DC area. And I did that for 4 years. And then I went back teaching and retired this last summer and immediately found something else to work on, which is this campaign.
Excellent. Let's talk about the campaign structure. It's been pretty much fully fleshed out now. We are a variety of us are in a variety of different stages of planning. We've gotten past the getting to know you stage. What are your priorities for the next month? What is your vision for the campaign? In terms of both, and I realize we're not asking for state secrets to be shared here, but in terms of the message that you're willing to bring to people, that you're looking to bring to people right now in the midst of COVID, in the midst of the now ascension, if you will, of possibly one of the worst worst attorney general, state's attorney general, one of the worst enablers of the drug war to possibly ever have the title of vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. All of that. What's the big picture? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, the biggest picture is we're trying to, obviously, we want to elect Joe as president, and we want to obviously get her into the debates. But both of those things, a prerequisite to those things is building up the base of support so that she would get the 15% in the polls. And even if we fall short on that, the key is building up that base of support so it's there not just for this election, but for the next election and the next election and the next election of that. Part of that's what you talked about earlier, which is our campaign team is all built up of libertarians. We did not, other than some libertarians that run a fundraising operation that we brought on. We've hired some professionals in those areas, but for the most part, we've gone out and recruited grassroots volunteers, grassroots activists, and those are the people that we put in these positions. It's interesting. We have Vermin Supreme's former campaign manager, Jacob Hornberger's campaign manager, Kokesh's campaign manager. Who am I forgetting here? We've got pretty much everybody. Judge Gray's campaign manager. So we've really got a large group of actors from across the party, left-leaning, right-leaning, new veterans. And what we want to do is make sure that we've got a trained group of experienced libertarian professional campaign people, so that 2 years from now and 4 years from now, there's a pool to draw from to be able to run campaigns of people who have the experience and know what they're doing. The last 3 campaigns, when we had some good candidates, I was a strong supporter of Gary Johnson, but the primary jobs in the campaign were done by hired guns that were brought in from the Republicans. And so we didn't have as many people learn those skills. We did have some, and a lot of them are involved in the campaign this time. Jess Mears, Seth Levy were both ones that had roles in the campaign. Joe Hauptman was a state campaign chair. So we had people that were involved. Our new person doing phone banking, Jackie Perry, did that in the state of Virginia. But we're trying to really expand that out so that there's a pool of people that will be there for the future. We're also working at trying to build our base of support when it comes to donors and volunteers. One of the questions we ask when somebody volunteers is we ask, are you a member of the Libertarian Party? And what we've been really encouraged by is that number is 27%. That means 73% of the people who are volunteering for Joe's campaign, Joe and Spike's campaign, are not already Libertarian Party members. And I believe that if we were to ask the same question of our contact list or same question of our donor list, we get similar results. We are reaching out way beyond just the party faithful and getting that broad mass of people that are fed up with the Democrats and Republicans, but they haven't found a home before now. That's our goal. Best estimates are there's probably 45 million people that lean libertarian out in the general population. We want to bring them in and make them part of the Libertarian Party, part of the Libertarian movement, help build Joe's support, get her into the debates, and achieve a free country. Because you've already said what the Democrat and Republican alternatives look like. And it seems like every election you say, well, then this time it can't possibly be worse than last time. And they always manage to find a way to make it worse.
And yet this is always the one election where each side needs us to either stay out of the fray or we just need you to work with us just one more time. The next election, we'll let you run the campaign that you want to run. Yeah.
Well, let's assume for the moment, let's give them the benefit of the doubt on that. How many states would that actually be true in? Most states, by the time election day rolls around, are pretty obvious for one candidate or another. Somebody is leading in that state by more than the margin of error. And so in most of the country, the vast majority of the country, you can vote for who you want, who you believe is the right candidate, and you don't have to worry about that somehow you're going to throw the election to the greater of the evils. It's just not going to happen. Right.
And that is no truer than any place than here in Rhode Island, otherwise known as Soviet Workers' Paradise, the state just past Vermont, which was the bluest state in the nation in the last presidential election, and for whom which a 5% vote will give us ballot access. You can vote for, and here's the irony. We're, by the way, I can't tell you how excited I am to routinely represent to corporate Democrats that they are in fact working for racists. It's just an astonishing opportunity. If you have any element of Facebook trolling you, that's me. All right, you can actually go out and just publicly troll all of these people. It's breathtaking how horrendous. Joe Biden set the stage for everything wrong with racial politics in America today. Kamala Harris is his chief enabler, and that's an amazing moment when you consider.
Well, and you got the.
Go ahead, buddy.
I was just going to say, and you've got the exact same thing happening over on the Republican side. We've had for years the Republicans talk about, oh, we have to have smaller government, we have to cut spending, whatever. And they're just, it's blank check after blank check after blank check. They're spending like crazy. The deficits are, there's no president that has driven up the deficit more than Trump has.
Right.
And so it's happening both. The Democrats, the Democratic candidates don't stand for what Democrats say they believe, and the Republican incumbents don't stand for what Republicans have traditionally said they believe.
Right. We've got the specter of budget busting, tariff inducing racists running from the Republican side, and we've got, well, again, 4 words: the war on drugs. Again, it's a pivotal moment in American history, and we are presented with choices, nothing but failure, outside, of course, of our candidates. It's an amazing opportunity.
It was interesting to note that, we've seen all this movement at the states in particular on legalizing marijuana, decriminalizing it, all these movements in the right direction. And the Democrats don't even have enough guts to put, descheduling marijuana into their platform.
Right.
And then they bring in Kamala Harris. It's just the same old, same old. And it's going to continue that way as long as the Democrats believe that they can act like this and they're still going to get the votes of people because, well, they're not the Republicans. And as long as the Republicans can sell out gun owners, for example, and say, but they'll still vote for us because we're not the Democrats, then nothing's going to change. They have to lose people's votes before anything will change.
Now, as you mentioned, no, absolutely. As you mentioned, Joe is just finishing up her bus tour. I understand that Spike is there's potential for Spike to be hitting the road soon. What's happening?
Oh,
there?
It's not potential. It's real. If you go to joe20.com and click on events, then you'll see the remaining stops on Joe's tour, and you'll see the upcoming stops on Spike's. And he's going to essentially start in Cincinnati and loop up to Flint, Michigan, and then across the country and up the West Coast, ending up in Seattle. He's been in the road almost 3 weeks.
What type of events are you trying to shoot for? Are you in the process of planning? Can we expect to see speechifying? Can we expect to see town hall meetings? How are you going to employ Spike?
I think the ones that Joe has been doing have been rallies, and where she's been delivering a stump speech and then talking to the crowd afterwards. I suspect that Spikes will have a little bit more of a town hall feel to them. Although, again, we're holding them outdoors so that people can do social distancing. We have, all the protective equipment available so that people can come safely to those events. But, meanwhile, Joe Biden is hiding in his basement, and Trump is hiding in the White House. Our candidates are out actually safely meeting with people across the country and actually talking to voters and finding out that, there are actually candidates that will actually listen to them and not simply take them for granted.
Right. Is Spike going to be focusing in terms of messaging? Are there particular areas Spike is going to be focusing on, or are you trying to tailor it really to the individual community?
Oh, I think that in general that we try to make sure that both Spike and Joe are in line with their messages. Obviously, they're of different generations, and so there's differences in that approach. I know that Spike really likes to talk about harm reduction, about how the things that government does hurts people, and how our policies will reduce that harm and actually benefit individuals. Joe talks about it from the standpoint of that government hurts the people they try to help. She talks about, uses an update to Harry Brown's analogy of that government is really good at breaking people's legs, handing them a pair of crutches and say, see, without us, you couldn't walk. And she takes it a step further and says, when we start to attack government programs, the first thing we want to do is to stop the leg breaking. not yank away the crutches. And so she's really trying to focus on the things that government does that hurt people. And there's a huge litany to choose from.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What now? I want to engage in a little bit of shameless self-promotion, folks. If you're listening to the show now, or you hear this over the weekend, Spike Cohen will actually be making a radio appearance, if you will, in Providence, Rhode Island, on WPRO AM 630, 99.7 FM at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. He will be spending an hour on a show called The Matt Allen Show. It's all talk, all political radio. Matt is what I would call right of center, and has displayed significant libertarian, I'll call them proclivities. He's a member of the media, so he remains independent, but he's been very fair to libertarian candidates over the year. The beauty of this is you'll have an opportunity. This is the station I mentioned, WPRO AM 630, is on iHeartRadio. And we did a series of posts about it. We'll do it again so that folks anywhere in the nation can listen to them in real time. And, of course, it'll be podcast on the station. We ask folks where and whenever possible to stream the podcast directly from the stadium because we ask you, of course, to support local media. But it'll be the first introduction, if you will, to Spike Cohen to the New England audience. And this is a station that's got significant coverage, I'd say over about a third of New England. So it's a large-scale AM/FM station. And boy, are we looking forward to that because I think Spike's got the talent, the skills, the message, and let's just say the inclination to, as we call it here in Rhode Island, to scare the squares. It's gonna be a hell of a good time. And so we'll be putting the posts out there. I hope folks will listen.
And I'm pretty sure that Joe's going to be up there a little right at the end of August, beginning of September. We're trying to nail down the exact dates, but she's going to be up in that area. Also hoping that we can work in a foray over to Maine, in addition to Massachusetts and Rhode Island area there, because I don't know if everybody has realized that, but this is the first time that we have a state, in the case of Maine, that is using ranked choice voting for president. And so the old argument that, you can't waste your vote. Well, with ranked choice voting, you pick your first choice, your second choice, your third choice. And, if the first choice doesn't win, then your vote goes on to the second choice until somebody has a majority of the vote for that state. So there's a real opportunity there to have something that's been going to be a little different than we've had in previous elections.
Excellent. So in talking about the media, we found already that there's a great deal of interest by both print and broadcast media here in New England for libertarian candidates. It's a compelling story after, 4, 5 years, 6 years now of talking about how low some of the other candidates are. It's clear people they want compelling. They're interested in another conversation. How are you finding media reception around the country?
Well, when the media comes out, and they are coming out a lot for the local tours, they're very fair. They're listening. They're very interested. Obviously, the issue we have is the national media seems to only be able to count to 2. Right. Now it's interesting. During the primaries, they managed to count to 23. But suddenly, when it's the general election, anything more than 2 would confuse the voters. So, not quite sure how that works. A friend of mine once mentioned that that political coverage is in the wrong place in the newspapers. It should be in the sports section, because that's how the reporters treat it. They cover politics the same way they cover the local baseball games or football games. Which team's ahead, which team's behind, who won, who lost. And, it's all done from that horse race perspective, with very little discussion of what it actually means in terms of issues and policies for the future of the country.
That's very, very much the case here in New England. In one sense, we call it handicapping the election. And the great thing about this show, for example, Matt Allen, he's all about the philosophy. He's all about political theory. He's all about trying to dissect how government works and more often doesn't work, as opposed to the usual routine, which is how much money did you raise, what are the polls showing, and that sort of defeatism in the mainstream media, if you will. I believe it's generational. What I'm finding, and I'd love your experience on this, is that the younger media, the independent media, and I'll call it the prominent independent media, are more issues, as our former President Bush would have said, orientated. Again, there's this refusal to accept mass marketing in that sweet spot that just shows so much potential in the libertarian movement, the 20 to 40 something year old age range. That again, just crying out for solutions. What's your impression, Ben?
Yeah, that's where we're seeing the strongest support for Joe in that 25 to 45 range, and then the next largest group is the 19 to 25. So that's the area where we've got the strongest support. We are seeing much more interest in the alternative media than in the big networks, because frankly the big networks are looking at who's going to write us big checks for running television ads.
Right.
So there is a certain degree of self-serving nature to their coverage. And the other thing that's interesting, you mentioned about polls. The Commission on Presidential Debates is going to determine who gets invited by which candidates get 15% of the polls, a number that was historically chosen to try to make sure that no third-party candidate would have ever met it. They picked the number intentionally to be sure that nobody would meet the threshold. But the interesting thing is, if you look at the 5 organizations that the polls they use, not one of those organizations has included George Jorgensen in any of their polls. It's kind of tough to show up at 15% in a poll that doesn't include your name.
Yeah. And again, if there's any, I can't even use the term silver lining, given the conditions that we're dealing with in terms of this national health crisis. But I'll call it an unanticipated side effect. If there's an unanticipated side effect in this current climate health-wise that we're in, it's that to a large degree, the media playing fields have been, I wouldn't call it leveled, but certainly our ability to connect with people is based on the same technology that their ability to connect with people are.
Yeah.
And there's huge opportunity in that for us. Productions like this, which are, in terms of its day-to-day content, is regionally paced. We can reach out on a dime to anyone's appliance and be live from wherever, anytime, any place. With the same production value.
Well, and Joe's doing the same thing.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and Joe, Joe's able to do that from the road. Spike's able to do that from the road, just like Joe Biden's able to do it from his basement.
Wow, it's bad. It's so that's.
I'm still waiting to figure out what excuse they're going to give for why they're not going to have debates with Joe. I'm thinking that they're going to somehow decide that putting Joe up on that debate stage, not a good idea. There'll be some reason that it just isn't going to work out.
Wouldn't be prudent, as they say, right? Wouldn't be prudent.
Yes.
Certainly, and anyone who watched the onset of the show, we routinely play in rotation the variety of ads that you folks have come up with. And I would just say to anyone in the independent media watching this, it's very simple to do. You know how to do it. If all of us, individually, small media outlets can be tiny, but in the aggregate, we are mighty. And if all of us are playing these readily available, highly slick, but potently messaged ads, then we will be mighty. Talk about the ads that you guys have done. They're phenomenal. You see people emotionally engaging with them.
Well, we've actually got 2 people that have been doing ads for us with a little different approaches. The one that you showed earlier on the screen was by a fellow by the name of Dan Schmote, who is with Goulash Media, And he's done, I think that was his third ad that he's done for us. Plus, he's also done one for Spike. And that's at Spike and commissioned. So we got 4 there. And then there's another fellow by the name of Austin Tudor, and he's with Vivid Videography, and he's done a number of ads as well. It's interesting. We found on Facebook that Dan's ads tend to get higher engagement from younger audiences, and Austin's ads tend to get more engagement from older audiences. So somebody's wondering, why are you having these two different approaches to ads? Well, we're trying to reach all of America. And so we find that the one approach tends to work better for some people and the other works better for others. So we do both.
Right. But what's to me is fascinating, in terms of this campaign, and I'm going to compare it to campaigns of the past, fairly or unfairly, is it's clear where you walk away from these commercials and it's very clear where we stand on issues. We're not hiding them. There's no embarrassment. There is no softening of the message. They hit you right between the eyes. If you look at the 2 commercials ago, for example, in our take on in our quote unquote anti-war statement, and it's compelling, but at the same time, you walk away convinced that we are in fact the party of peace. I haven't seen that in libertarian advertising ever.
I think there's been some that were clear on the principles. They just weren't necessarily well done in some of the older campaigns. We've got some really solid ad people here. And by the way, most of these ads are for the most part they're not generally scripted. That is, we typically, I'll go to Dan and say, okay, we need to put together an ad on healthcare, and he will take all the clipping, the things that Joe's been saying, the things that Spike's been saying, getting visuals to highlight and build on those ideas. Mm-hmm. And what you're seeing is simply their message from the campaign trail put in a way that is really connects with people and reaches them. Same thing with Austin's. It's basically, it's her words and what she's been saying on those issues cut in with what the Democrats and Republicans, the various presidents have been saying over the years, and contrasting that.
Talk to me about volunteer generation, if you will. I've already gotten more leads for volunteers in 2020 in the middle of August than I did during the entirety of the 2016 campaign. And by the way, I'm not here to bash that campaign, and I'm not asking you to. I just want to point out the growth of the party and the growth of our ability, all of which is being generated in-house from the party, and the successes that were already happening. Who's in charge of that, and how are they doing it? Doing a hell of a job.
Well, frankly, all we're really doing is when you get to the website, there's a section there that has the opportunity for people to volunteer. People are clicking it and filling it out. I think we're up to around 8,000 volunteers, and as I mentioned before, nearly 3/4 of them are not people who've been involved with the Libertarian Party before. And then once they volunteer, we try to get in touch with them and get them work. Frankly, one of the weak spots we've had up till now is we have had more volunteers than we had things for them to do, but that is rapidly changing. We now have Jackie Perry, who is organizing phone banking and text banking, and she's been putting an army of people out, reaching out to people. For example, each one of the sites when in the bus tour, we're reaching out to everybody that's on the contact list and all of our contacts, donors, volunteers, and getting them to come out and to assist. Ballot drives, we mobilize that to get additional signatures in Maine, in Maryland, in Pennsylvania. We're doing it now in Alabama. And so we've got literature now going out, and that we're going to be mobilizing volunteers to distribute around the country. I think we've got the first about 500,000 pieces that are going to the press, and then we're just sending it out to the various local groups to get it out there, and as they use it up, we'll send them more.
You can't
make those contacts.
You can't see it here, but immediately to my right are 4 pallets of lawn signs. This studio also serves as the central distribution point, if you will, for New England, for the Jorgensen
And you'll be getting
campaign.
literature too. You're going to be getting literature too.
We look forward to it. Maybe by next week you'll see it all stacked up in boxes behind me. But and a shout out to folks who might hear the show tonight or this weekend around New England. We have signs. We're going to do our best to get them out to people as quickly as possible. Again, another enhancement. You know, I didn't see signs. Again, I'm beating a drum. I'm probably overplaying it, but you know, getting signs in August is good. Getting signs in November, not good. So it's there's ample opportunity for folks to now get involved in phone banking and text banking. Talk about text banking a little bit, because they were texting that's incredibly important.
It's pretty much the same kind of thing that happens with the phone bank, except that it's texting. Of course, for young people, that's their mode of operation.
Right.
And we find that it's a lot easier to get volunteers to text than it is to get them to make phone calls. And so the application will make the connection with a person so that the number is not transmitted. You don't have a privacy question. And so if they'll send out the basic starting message, and then if the person responds, there's a live human being there to text back and interact with them and
folks,
encourage them to.
And I was going to say, folks from around
encourage them to get involved.
Right, folks from around the country can participate in this as volunteers.
That's correct.
I mean, if there's an event,
yeah. So when we were doing stuff in Maryland, it was not just people in Maryland that were doing that texting. It was people all over the country. Right. And the same is true as we're contacting people on the tours to bring out the crowds for the bus tour. That's those people doing those calls and doing that texting are located anywhere in the country.
Right. And that's why it's so important. This is going to be my cheerleading call here now. Let's not talk about the campaign anymore. Let's do the campaign. The technology is in place. There's so much opportunities for volunteers to work at their own pace. It really, you've got jobs to do for people of virtually every time commitment, don't you?
That's absolutely right. And all they have to do is, if you haven't done this already, go to joe20.com and first sign up if you haven't already done that. And then the form's right there on the front page. And then click where it says volunteer and fill in the information there and send it. You'll immediately get an opportunity to link to something about 11 things you can do right now. That's that individual activism you were just talking about. But you'll also then be contacted by one of our volunteer coordinators to try to get you find out what you're interested in and get you connected in to the volunteer apparatus. And of course, there is the ever-present donate button, because we also need money to print the signs and print the literature and buy the advertising. So that's important too.
Right. And it's a challenge this year because, in-person events are going to be at a premium. It's difficult to do in-person events on the local basis. You saw Bernie Sanders, in a sense, change the electoral world by his ability to capitalize on very small donors. The $5 and the $10.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Right.
That's exactly what we're doing.
So tell people just how important in the aggregate that $10 contribution you might make this week really is.
Well, I mean, we pull those up. We're right now running, I think we were at $2,000 a day, kicking up to $5,000 a day in Facebook ads. And interestingly enough, we're actually bringing in enough new people that we're within a short period of time, we've raised enough money to recoup the cost of the ads. And so that's why we keep ramping them up. It pays for the television ads that we're running. Right now, those are in streaming platforms. So if you watch Tubi or Hulu or some of these other Apple TV, Google TV, when the things that have ads that come up, we're running in those ads targeted as best we can to those independents, people that are not already tied into the Democrats or Republicans. And getting the shorter versions of the ads like you saw earlier. So it's paying for that. It's paying for the signs that are going out. We're not waiting for people to pay for signs. We're just getting them put out there so people can distribute them. They don't do any good sitting in a warehouse somewhere. We're doing the same thing with literature. We're going to push it out there. Well, also with literature, the masters for the literature will be posted on the website. So if you're in an area and you're in a hurry, you can get the masters and go to your local printer and print the literature yourself and start distributing it. You don't have to wait for us. And that's really the thing. You don't have to wait for somebody to give you permission or for somebody to give you orders. You can go to Facebook, the Facebook page and group, find things that are posted there, share them with your friends and family on your page. Reach out to more people, because that's what brings it. And again, be sure to be, the important thing is, we know there are people that are out there that are looking for an alternative. They are not 100 corner of the diamond chart libertarians. There are going to be issues where they disagree with us on. And what we need to do is welcome them for their willingness to step outside the Democratic and Republican parties, the red and blue universes, and to consider alternatives, to be open to the idea that freedom works. And there's going to be some issues where they're not convinced yet. And the last thing we need to do is berate them on the one issue where they're not lined up and ignore the 10 issues where they're in agreement with us. Let's welcome the agreement, work together. And my experience has been that the more people involved with the Libertarian Party, the more consistent their libertarianism becomes. A friend of mine used to refer to it as, if you put a cucumber in vinegar, the vinegar doesn't become cucumbered. The cucumber becomes a pickle. And that's really what we've got here, is that when we bring new people in and they're surrounded by these ideas and have respectful and discussions, then we find that they're generally persuaded. If they're aligned with us in generally, then they'll ultimately be persuaded on those other issues. There's nothing to be gained by trying to beat libertarian into them. It just doesn't work.
Now, Larry Sharp, I think we've all heard Larry Sharp's inspirational speech about planting a seed. This is a group that has already had that happen at some level. I'll spare you many of the cliches, but the most obvious one is let that seed blossom. Allow folks to begin their libertarian journey knowing that their willingness to actually approach us has really crossed that first difficult step. So if they're willing to do that for us, then we need to be great hosts and hostesses. We need to welcome them into our community and have the conversations, be patient. For a lot of folks, this is a sea change. You and I are immersed in the philosophy. We live our lives by this. Most people aren't. And yet there are 2 or 3 stages. Some of those folks will become libertarians, join the party. A percentage of them will become lifetime volunteers. Some will even run for office. Just as many or more will appreciate the philosophy, may not embrace it in its entirety, but be willing to vote for our candidates, support us on our ballot access issues, and argue on our behalf in order to break through that glass ceiling and work against the duopoly. Every one of those people are important.
Yeah, there'll be people that simply feel that we're closer to where they are than the Democrats and Republicans are. Mm-hmm. And we need to welcome those things. One of the things that we have done, you talked about how hardcore and consistent the campaign has been. But we've also been very careful to try to make sure that we're talking in terms of things that can actually be done, that people can see that, okay, this is something that could really occur, that the president has the authority to do, that you could get the country to go along with it, rather than trying to talk about some pie in the sky utopia. So, for example, the president has the authority to bring the troops home, and Jo Jorgensen as president will do that. She will, we're going to be careful in doing that, not to make sure we don't create chaos in the process. Right. It'll be done with care, but there's no reason for us to be involved in these foreign wars. There is no reason for us to be locking people up for these victimless crimes. There's no reason for people who come back from Congress and enjoy a cigar and a drink to be throwing people into jail for smoking marijuana. Okay, that just makes no sense at all. And so that's something that, getting rid of those penalties, we can show examples like in Portugal where they've taken those steps and shown that it does not result in a mass increase in drug use, quite the contrary, that people are finally able to seek treatment who need it and not be worried about the fact that they're going to out themselves as criminals. So you can see the, in healthcare, we've seen this grotesque situation that's been developed where you have one side arguing for government control of medicine. Essentially, that you hear Medicare for all, as Joe puts it. She hears VA hospital for all. Mm-hmm. That's what socialized medicine is. But the Republicans are essentially want to have everything controlled by insurance companies. And that's not good either. We have a situation where any healthcare expenditure, no matter how small, has to be processed either by government, by an insurance company, or both, which is insane. I mean, if you think about that for a minute, what would happen if your car insurance worked that way? If your car insurance covered Phillips at the gas station and oil changes and car washes, okay, the price would become massively expensive. The insurance would become massively expensive, and you would have all those things that we're paying for the insurance would become more expensive as well.
What issues do you think? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was saying, what issues?
We had one of the smoke alarms was misbehaving for a moment. I was afraid it was interfering here, but it stopped.
No, and we have one of those great internet connections where we talk over each other sometimes. But generationally, I mean, you've mentioned a wide-ranging list of issues. We talk about that new generation citizen, the 20 to 30 something year old. What has the party, I should say the candidacies, have they decided which issues they think resonate with each successive generation as we get up into, say, yours and my ages?
I think it is less so much of the issues themselves, although there are some issue differences, but rather differences in tone and approach. You'll see that from example, the way that Spike approaches and messages some of these issues and compare it to the way that Joe messages and advances them. The content is exactly the same, but the styles are different. And Spike has one that is more geared towards a younger demographic, and Joe's is geared towards an older, not, like I said, our sweet spot is primarily 25 to 45 is where the, I am outside of our primary demographic here, but so there's differences in tone, differences in how things are language. There are some differences in issues. Young people want it. The environment, for example, isn't necessarily one of their top issues, but you have to have a serious proposal on the environment. If you're saying, oh, it's not an issue or doesn't matter, you're not going to be taken seriously. If you're talking to older people, you've got to have something serious to say about Social Security and what's going to be done about that. Young people want to know, is there anything going to be there for them in terms of Social Security? That's why I think that Joe's proposal of allowing opt-outs particularly popular among young people, and how you're going to then continue to pay the benefits for older people to make sure that they're not left in the cold. Because right now we've got the Social Security system is now starting to spend more than it brings in every year, and of course by bringing in, they're taking money from young people and giving it to the older people. There's nothing set aside, and so it is a system that is designed to get worse. And when people talk about, oh, we're going to cut payroll taxes or everything else, well, if they're talking about the Social Security taxes, they're basically cutting the money that's going into the system, so they're making that more unsustainable. If they're cutting the withholding from they're not cutting your taxes. They're cutting the amount of money that's being taken out, which means you're going to have a big tax bill when you go to file next year.
Right.
So they're doing nothing to actually cut spending. Nothing.
Do you sense real anger, if you will, starting to bubble up from the 20s and 30-something-year-old as they see their future being just devastated, both in our terrible handling of this health crisis, and then, of course, the financial implications of not just this, but the horrific deficit spending. Do you think they're finally mad enough to make a change?
Oh yeah, well they're mad. The question is to what extent do they understand that government is the cause of it? For example, young people are getting just buried in student debt. Do they understand that it is the government that caused the tuition to go up so rapidly, the whole student loan thing? Because basically by guaranteeing those student loans, they gave the universities a blank check to increase spending because they knew that the students would have to pay for it. They would come up. They would borrow the money to meet the tuition, no matter how high the tuition goes. Those increases would not be sustainable were it not for the government programs.
Well, are you as optimistic as I am?
I am optimistic in terms of the growth, what we're seeing in terms of more people coming up, people recognizing that what the Democrats and Republicans are offering is not going to give us a solution to any of our problems. But with all these things, they take time. There's no magic bullet. There's again, a friend of mine used to refer to it as there's no magic bullet. There's no silver bullet. There's silver buckshot. It's a lot of different things that have to be done to reach a lot of different people. But the audience is out there. There are enough people that lean our direction to make us competitive at a presidential level. We simply have to reach them. And that's the challenge.
I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I know it's been a long day for you, and there's a lot of long days ahead, but I want to thank you for reaching out. Let's close on this. If you had an opportunity to somehow do what we couldn't do in Orlando, which was to bring the entire libertarian nation, if you will, into one big room, and preach to them in a sense of the importance of this campaign, not just to the party, but to the nation at large and the opportunity it represents. What would you say to folks to encourage them to just break out of their shell, volunteer, and just get involved and take it personally?
I think the real key is to think about your children, your grandchildren, the coming generations. The path we're on is not sustainable. And the people out there, they're fed up, they're angry, they're looking for an alternative. We just have to show it to them, and we have to show it to them in a way that meets them where they are, not at some, theoretical time in the future. What can we do right now? That libertarian ideas are what would work right now to make the country a better place for themselves, their family, and their community. And then find those people out there that already recognize that there's something wrong and show them alternative. This is not about persuading people to change their lifelong beliefs. It's discovering the people who already know there's something wrong and they're just looking for that alternative. discovery before persuasion.
Excellent. Steve Dasma, he is a leader by example. He has held, worked for, performed at just about every level, every job possible by a libertarian in the history of this party. And I would say he's asking not for that level of commitment, but let's just say for all of us to join in whatever level we can in these challenge times, and just let's just leave it all out on the field for this one. We've got about 90 days left. What is it, about 81, 82 days, Steve? Left.
84, I think it was, when I looked the other day.
80,
Actually, if you go to our issues page, at the bottom of our issues page, there's a countdown clock.
Excellent.
So if you go to joe20.com and go to the issues page, go all the way to the bottom, you'll see a little countdown clock there.
So as we watch that clock over the coming months, let's try to do nothing less than change the world. Because we've got that opportunity right now, right here, for the next 90 days. Let's all leave it out on the field, make a personal commitment to whatever degree possible to change the world. We do that. I've been blessed over the 10 or so years that I've been involved in the movement to meet astonishingly talented people with great personal commitment. And as I often close out, we've also got people with us who have had a lifetime of commitment. And when I think about the folks, as I always say, who were out there in the 70s, 2 or 3 people marching in a town parade, people tabling when folks would look at them like they were literally from another planet. The folks who have literally led a lifetime of libertarianism and bled for this party and bled for this philosophy, I believe we owe it to them to take this opportunity and use it for whatever good it presents us. So let's get to work. How about it, Steve?
Absolutely. Come to joe20.com and sign up, volunteer, donate, and make it happen.
Thank you so much. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, hosting in its 4th week, I believe, Campaign Update, Joe 20 Campaign Update, Friday nights immediately following the LPTV Hour with the Candidates. The purpose of this show is to do nothing less than equate the grassroots with the leadership and folks involved at virtually every level of a presidential campaign that has the potential to literally change history. Folks, if you see this show and see our message, take a moment to like us on the Facebook. Most importantly, take the opportunity, volunteer for the campaign. Let's get involved. Thank all of you for joining us, and we will see you next Friday night. Friday night, well, we've got a very special guest on this show. I think her name is Jo Jorgensen. She's going to be weighing in herself after spending several weeks on the road, literally tirelessly advocating for liberty, as Steve says, not just on our behalf, but on our children's and our grandchildren's behalf. And with the type of commitment that she and the other candidates and the other folks have exhibited in this party over the last year or so, we owe nothing less than whatever we can bring, whatever talents we have to the campaign itself. So next Friday night, about 5 after, 10 after 9, Jo Jorgensen herself will be joining us here on Campaign Update Joe 20. Thanks very much for joining us. Have a wonderful night.
I appreciate the opportunity. Take care.